I'm going to kick things off though to set the scene here, Gur. Can you tell us exactly what iiDENTIFii is all about?
iiDENTIFii is focused on delivering true enterprise-grade identity verification for Africa. So our core focus continent is Africa. Our mission is to stop identity theft in Africa, and we do that by enabling enterprises throughout the continent to onboard, as well as subsequently authenticate individuals from any device, whether it be a mobile device or a PC device.
How did you come up with that idea? Because, we're going to dig into that in a moment.
It's quite a personal story. We actually share it every single time that we hire a new individual onto the team, just to make sure that they're on purpose in terms of our mission statement. So my eldest daughter is now 6 years old, Sophia. She's 6 years old, and about 5 years ago, she was 1 year old. And my wife and I were living in a relatively small apartment at the time. That's a beautiful note, Colin. Makes us all feel loved. Nice, absolutely. And my daughter was 1 year old at the time. My wife and I were living in a relatively small apartment in Cape Town. And with all the furniture, Sophia wasn't learning to walk quick enough for my wife, who's a pediatrician and very milestone obsessed. So as a good mother would do, my wife started to focus very much on Property 24 to investigate 25 million rand houses in order to get my daughter walking. But I was convinced that there might be ulterior motives. And so I took Sophia down to the Greenpoint Park Stadium, a stadium park, which is a really beautiful park here in Cape Town, a couple of 100 meters away from where we lived. And in 6 weeks, holding her little hands and feet on the grass, she had learned to walk within 6 weeks in a really beautiful environment, sort of between 6 a.m. and 7 a.m. And it just became one of those beautiful childhood memories that you have with your kids. I was relaying the same story that I'm sharing with you now to a friend about 2 months later after this actually happened, and they said that they had a very, very different experience in the exact same park, where their housekeeper was pushing their toddler in the pram, and a gentleman approached their housekeeper with 40,000 rand cash in a tog bag and said, if we can keep this quiet and relaxed, you can take the tog bag and go left, and I'll take the pram and the child and then go right. And I was really, really shocked that A, that happens in the world. I think I was extremely naive about the things that do happen in the world, and B, that it happened 1 kilometer away from our home. And as a result of that, I really started to dig into, why would a human steal another human's child rather? And you kind of understand that if people are under financial pressure, maybe they'll steal a car, they'll break and enter. Not that I'm condoning those things, but they're more understandable than actually stealing someone's child. And I realized that for 40,000 rand cash, you could buy or acquire, completely the inappropriate word, but you could obtain someone's child in South Africa and sell them in Europe to a unsuspecting parental couple who thought they were doing a good thing by adoption. And that really started the fire in the belly about stopping the money laundering that comes out of human trafficking, comes out of sex trafficking, drug trafficking, and terrorist activities. And it was because it was such a personal sort of experience, we got very, very serious about doing identity theft protection properly and doing it in a statistical and robust fashion.
So that's a really interesting sort of origin story, and must have had a big emotional impact. How do you get a jump from that to something like identity, but specifically biometric identity management? Because we're talking cutting edge technology here. We're talking algorithms, talking massive data sets. This isn't easy.
It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. So, when something is necessary and the mission and the passion is big enough, you just find a way and you do it properly. And we were lucky; we had an incredible first commercial partner in the form of Standard Bank that with MZ and Stanton Naidu, we were able to co-create a solution. We were able to co-create it at scale, and Standard Bank, as our first customer, put us through our paces in terms of demanding extremely robust product design, and led us to one of our core sort of culture statements, which is, in God we trust, but everyone else bring data. And that really was a result of working with Standard Bank. They were like, we're not interested in switching this on until we can see and you can prove statistically that this works. And the combination of the passion and the demand of Standard Bank forged what we believe is the diamond of true identity verification in Africa.
Jonathan, how come Standard Bank agreed to go and partner and help identify on their journey in those early days? Because that's a very non-banking sort of story. Normally, let's just add some detail to that. Normally, we're coming to you and asking for some money, and you're turning around and saying no. But here, you're actually doing something which sounds a little bit similar to corporate venturing, which is, a topic which is dear to me.
That mug really is distracting, Colin. But
you like
I think
this?
Gur's story, as he said, we were their first customer, and obviously at the time it was primarily focused around one of our digitization initiatives, removing the manual piece of onboarding somebody new. So the experience completely breaks down when you've got a great digital channel to provide a product, but you need to onboard somebody with loads of forms and face-to-face visits. So that is a core problem statement. It's not new. Many organizations have got it. And the team in our security team came across Gur, and as he said, this thing was really tested and pushed through the paces before it got taken live on some of our big now flagship solutions. So I met Gur through his wanderings around the bank in that time. And that was probably about 12 months before our strategy, OneHub, which we'll get into in a minute, really sort of brought us back together in a different guise of partnership.
Fair enough. So, sorry, Gur, I was just going to say, so you've come in with this idea. I just want to get this next part, because a lot of people think that when it comes to tech, it's all about, coders and computers and cloud and sort of pizza boxes and, funding and massive data sets. And, that's not exactly how this journey had to start, because I think it's interesting that when you started to go down this route, you realized that you had to go and get data to train the algorithms, to test the algorithms, to make sure that they were robust. How did you go about that approach? Because I think it will surprise people.
I didn't feel so bad. In fact,
I don't know what that, we've got a cross line here. I don't know what that is. We'll have to ignore that. But do your best, Gur.
No problem. And I think you asked how we did it. I think what was the glue that bound Standard Bank and iiDENTIFii together was trust. I think trust is the common theme that enables people to engage people and businesses to engage businesses. But a lot of the vendors, Standard Bank looked at about 60 or 70 vendors before shortlisting us for a proof of concept. And I think a lot of the vendors were going around the angle of proving that the identity document hadn't been forged and hadn't been photo replaced, which is quite a large claim to make. And we had, as iiDENTIFii, independently tested that assertion and been able to perform photo replacement and modifications on identity documents and push them through successfully the largest OCR engines in the world that were serving the likes of Google and PayPal, etc. So we knew from direct experience that we didn't fully believe that story. And when we engaged Standard Bank, I still remember we were in Baker Street and there was a big wooden table, mahogany table, with some very, very smart, capable digital transformation experts, about 12 of them, all poised with their iPads and their iPad pencils, listening intently. And I think because we were so new to the game, we were comfortable to disrupt and be completely honest and say, we don't believe that doing work on the identity document is going to give you the comfort that you need. We believe that the identity document can be forged and that we need to go to a golden source of truth and actually compare the biometric to a biometric image that can't be forged. So I think what bound Standard Bank and iiDENTIFii was the openness, the transparency, and that went back to the mission where I said to my co-founder and CTO, Marco Wagner, I said, if we can't do this properly, we're not doing it at all. We're not here to put revenue on the board. We're here to do it properly. And I think Standard Bank sensed that. And on the other side, you had MZ Umoji and you had Stanton Naidu. and Buzi Mbuisa, who at the time were completely aligned with doing things extremely properly and in an unwavering, uncompromising way. And that's actually what forged the partnership, and it allowed us to scale test and run the stats and train the algorithms.
But scale testing, I just want to go and make sure we get that out there. You actually had to go and invite people to come into town halls and schools and sit down and take the photos and run these manually. This was you doing this in the early days with a couple of people and trying to get through thousands. Is that right?
Yeah, that's it. That's how we did it. The only way to do it was everybody was relying on NIST engines and running, relying on the algorithm accuracy that was documented in the NIST. The thing with NIST is that every 3 months they release a new FRVT, facial recognition vendor test leaderboard. And we couldn't keep up as a startup because, how do you keep up with the latest facial rec engine? You have to, integrate a new tech, you have to train it again. So eventually I established contact and formed a relationship with Patrick Rother of the NIST and was open with him. I said, listen, Patrick, we can't keep up. What engines should we be using? And he asked me to share the use cases. He said, who are you onboarding? What are you onboarding? What countries are you working in? And I said, look, these are the countries. This is the continent. These are the ethnicities we see. And he guided us towards the first facial rec engines we used. And then in order to train them in production, you can't just take an engine off the shelf and hope it works because it's trained on very neat, very structured database data. You need to train it in production. So yes, the only way to do that was to do it in production, to get individuals who opted in from, wasn't POPI at the time, it was sort of GDPR. We had to comply with GDPR standards, get signature forms signed. We used the handsets that they used, which were 600-700 Rand Android devices. We knew the ground truths because we were dealing with the data subjects and their source biometrics. And we had to train the algorithm in production. And only when we were comfortable enough with the extremely low false accept rates did we then proceed to the Friends and the Family program in Standard Bank, which was the second wave of training. And only after that did we start to go into pre-prod and eventually prod.
So you've done the testing and everything is looking good. At some point during that journey, you've started to get comfortable that the percentages of accurate reads on people is looking positive. I want to bring in Chris Britz's question here. This isn't just taking a photo though of the face. I mean, you've got a proof of life aspect that you've got to bring into this as well. You've got a static photo that you're comparing against. How did you get that all right so that it's a real person, a real living, breathing person, and you're comfortable that it's going to be difficult to fake in some sort of way?
Yeah, Chris's question is spot on. You can't take a photo of a photo and match it to another image and expect that you're dealing with a real human. So there were different evolutions of liveness technology. The first asked the data subject to prove that they were alive and not a photo by gesture, i.e. winking or blinking or tilting your head like Colin, you're doing now. You're looking around, you're moving, you're blinking, you're winking. These are evidence of life. The challenge with those is that you could take a LinkedIn image of Colin very easily and with $49 worth of software, animate that face. So that gesture liveness became redundant very quickly. Then the step up from that 2D gesture liveness is 3D liveness, which is, okay, I'm not just asking a 2D video to move or to blink. I now need proof that it's three-dimensional. And that three-dimensionality is bypassed by what's known as a presentation attack. And that's what we refer to as 3D liveness, the fact that there's actually a three-dimensional object on the other side and a person. The challenge with 3D liveness is that when you're doing the onboard, it's actually a video stream that is looking at your face. So in the same way that Zoom's camera is open and is streaming your light to the chip set of the mobile device or the laptop that you're using, when we're doing a liveness evaluation, we're also enabling a video stream. Now, if an identity attacker obtains that video stream and plays that video stream back to a biometric system, that's what's known as a digital replay attack and an injection attack. And that's what needs to be defended against. That's the type of attack that is much more scalable and sustainable. And that's what we call 4D liveness, to make sure that the individual is present at that exact point in time. And that fourth dimension is time. So 3D is, length, breadth, and depth. And the fourth dimension is length, breadth, and depth at that point in time, defending against a digital replay attack.
All right. Now, we could spend all day talking about the security protocols that you have to put in place and the authentication models and how you go and store the information in a secure sort of framework, which is unhackable. I mean, there's so much going on there. But the guys that actually had to ask these questions were Standard Bank, right? Because Jonathan, you and the team have come along and you've said, we're quite interested in looking and seeing if we can, place this on OneHub. How long did it take to go and get through the sort of testing process? Because I just remember back to my banking days, even simple things, we're looking at, weeks, months of compliance and pen testing and various other things, even just taking on normal vendors to service your banking colleagues.
Yeah, and Colin, we were quite lucky because Gur and the team had embedded themselves already as a vendor into the bank. So, OneHub's core mission is to not solve for the bank's problems anymore, but really to partner our clients on their digital journeys and their problem statements. And in talking to our clients in the early days, before we'd actually launched OneHub, we quickly recognized that this problem statement around onboarding or making sure that somebody in your book that you've been paying a pension to is still alive, or managing ghost employees, or checking that it is Jonathan Lamb on the other side of the call before you make a big payout for an insurance claim. These problem statements came thick and fast when we started engaging our clients, trying to see where we should really focus our energy on bringing partners onto OneHub. And so this identity management and not so much only identity management, really knowing who you're dealing with, continually being able to validate that it is the same person, they are alive, and the documents are valid, was sort of sticking out like a sore thumb in our engagement. And so, as I said, I'd known Gur, I knew what he'd done in the bank. So where better place to start than finding a vendor the bank already knows and trusts and has built a capability around. So the due diligence piece and knowing this tech worked was already a tick because we were using it in our own, frontline systems. What we then needed to do, to take it through, and as you say, we're doing something very different on OneHub where we're not using this capability for the bank. So it's not just a procurement discussion for the bank. We needed to build a model that gave us and the organization comfort that we could bring safely this iiDENTIFii capability into a place where we can then connect it to our clients for use in their business. And that we really, again, iiDENTIFii were the first partner on OneHub, the first external partner. So we really crafted this journey with the iiDENTIFii team, a lot of pain, a lot of frustration at times. Again, a big organization dealing with a fintech. We had to bridge that dynamic, but we got it right. And we've reused this pattern that we built with iiDENTIFii and Gur and the team over and over again.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. That so you're using. Sorry, Joe. So you're basically saying, you've partnered with iiDENTIFii. You've used them for some of your core processes in terms of your own client onboarding, KYC processes, which obviously we know you've got to really batten down because the regulators are putting in some fairly significant fines to the financial institutions that fail on those steps nowadays. So you've got a huge amount of trust in terms of that product, but then you've switched it and you've essentially said, if we can trust it, we want to offer it to our client base. Is that roughly the journey?
Exactly. There's no better conversation to have with a client who's thinking about this or is going from a very manual process to say, this is the fintech we use. This is the tech we use in the bank. And not only that, the other benefit that you get by using this through us is we're not finished with Gur and team as it relates to what we're doing inside the bank. We're rolling it out to more markets. More and more of our digital solutions are adopting the iiDENTIFii capability. And so with that brings use cases that if we as a multinational operating on the continent are facing, it's likely that those same problems exist in many of our clients. And so the story really is twofold. We trust it because we use it. We continually make sure that we run due diligence on the tech. So we're confident in positioning it on OneHub as a partner. And then as it builds out for the bank, our clients that are using it through OneHub get all the benefit of what we're building into it as the bank.
Do you have any clients that are using it yet?
Yes, we've got a few clients that are using it. Some one in Botswana, a few in South Africa, and in the DRC as well. And really what's been fascinating, as you talk to clients about this, once they're bought into it and they see it, you find use cases you would never have imagined. And that's the beauty of being able to engage into and bring the iiDENTIFii team into conversations with not just financial institutions, mines, retailers, obviously insurers, big in the financial institution space. But as you broaden it out, you find use cases like ghost employee management, or the tail end of a pension fund book. It's much easier to do biometric scanning of an individual to prove liveness, etc., before big payouts. So the use cases started to come thick and fast. And we're in the middle of COVID when we started this, so brand new use cases were emerging. It was a fascinating time to have struck this partnership and taken the iiDENTIFii capability onto OneHub.
Gur, what's your benefit for partnering with a bank like Standard Bank and going through a kind of marketplace platform like OneHub? Because presumably a lot of the clients you could approach directly.
We could, but it's distribution. And
Got no sound now, Gur. Oh, there we are.
You got me here?
Yeah, we got you now.
Distribution. So, and the one-to-end relationship, right? So obviously we don't have the human resources and or the balance sheet of Standard Bank. So trying to reach thousands and tens of thousands of customers and clients through Africa directly is going to be far more taxing on iiDENTIFii than doing a single point of integration through OneHub and through John's team and leveraging the one-to-end relationship that OneHub can bring. So it's distribution, it's also the credibility that Standard Bank's stamp of approval bring in the conversation that increases the conversion rate of closing clients together. Number three, we built inside OneHub. John's done a fantastic job in terms of building product owners, specialist product owners, and integration specialists that support our team to do those deployments to their customers. And then, of course, there's the natural effects of the platform and the cross-platform benefits, which John and the OneHub team acts as a central intelligence point to take feature requests, support requests, and product roadmap enhancements. We're getting antennae into the rest of the market through a single point of intelligence. So those are all massive factors that motivate us to deepen the relationship.
Yeah, very cool. Look, there's a bunch of questions that are coming, and let's try to cover a couple of those now. I really like, well, actually I like all of them, but let's just go in order. From Brian, identity management systems carry a lot of personal information. If Brian wasn't asking this, I was going to ask it. How have you managed to secure this up and deal with Papaya? Because obviously this had a significant impact in South Africa over the last year or so.
Yeah, I think the main thing is that we don't store biometric data. So we don't. We process, we do the match, we destroy the data, we issue destruction certificates, and we return the sensitive data to the institutions at hand. And those institutions have a direct POPIA and or GDPR relationship with their customers that they manage. So we're not actually a holder of that data.
Maybe, Colin, can I just add to that as well? Because something that came up quite early on when we started positioning this capability to our client base, where we're talking to any financial institution, obviously there's an element of competition that the bank on some of the product lines has with that institution. So again, we've been very clear that once you have come through OneHub and launched yourself into the iiDENTIFii world, be it through their API or their front end, we've got zero sight of that. The bank does not get any sight of what an insurer is running through the system. Gur doesn't store the information, it's passed back to the client. We don't get any sight of that. And that's one of the patterns that actually emerged out of our experience with iiDENTIFii and bringing them on. Incredibly important, gets asked all the time. It's a key piece of the puzzle that we now upfront say to clients. We see there's not even a Chinese wall. It's impossible for us to get access to the data that you're running through iiDENTIFii if you consume it through OneHub.
Understood, important point. Great question here. Education. I guess, Gur, this is one for you. Do you think you should have biometrics for all pupils, teachers, everyone that's involved in the education field?
Absolutely. It's a massive space. You've got vulnerable young adults or vulnerable young children where there's a concern here about in the comment that I see, concern about human trafficking of children, etc. So I think identity verification of the caregivers and the education and the teachers that look after those kids should be in place, so that not if but when, even if it's a small percentage, there are concerns about the safety of the children, the biometric identity verification on those caregivers and teachers is in place, so we could root cause analysis that. So it's a massive gap. And then on the flip side, of course, there are some concerns around the authenticity of who's actually taking the exam, who's actually answering the question, who's receiving the educational certification on the other side of an online exam, maybe not in a rural area, but more in the metropolitan areas. And in that space, biometric verification of the person actually sitting the exam and educational proctoring is an important concern.
Cybercrime is rife throughout the world. I like this question. How do you go and deal with who has the responsibility? You go through the process, you've done the maximization you can. So I've gone through let's just use a practical example. I've onboarded, hey, I'm Colin, here's my passport or ID document, and someone hacks into my account the following day and steals all my money. Where does that sit? I mean, are you taking huge amounts of liability here, Gur, in terms of offering this service, or does it sit with Standard Bank, or is it a bit undefined at the moment because this is a new area?
No, the institution that's responsible from a liability perspective, institution that is, either receiving the money to deposit into the account, it's the accountable institution, or it's the institution that is releasing the pension funds to the different recipients. That institution must make a selection on the vendor they use, and that vendor selection is their responsibility through their procurement process. We will put forward as iiDENTIFii and or the competitors of iiDENTIFii, we will put together and put forward the best possible solution that we see in place. But traditionally, the responsibility sits legally and from a brand perspective with the accountable institution or the entity. What we're starting to see in the market is that those entities are asking us to differentiate ourselves by coming alongside them and taking some financial responsibility and saying, look, if we do get breached, how do you respond? And I think there's even a conversation to be had with cybercrime insurance, which is getting more difficult to obtain and more expensive to insure, to say, these are the differentiators of iiDENTIFii: the 4D liveness, the accuracy of the face match, the robust InfoSec protocols, which is something that we're hearing again from the market on the differentiators of the OneHub and iiDENTIFii product, to go to the cybercrime insurance underwriters and say, if the client is actually deploying iiDENTIFii through OneHub, we feel there's a motivation to reduce insurance premiums for the client. So we're actually getting into those commercial conversations as well.
I think just to add,
Go on, John,
Colin, the other important point around the cybercrime and where does the risk sit is the fraudsters are equally putting in as much effort as teams like Gur are to get around everything we put in place. What this tech does, though, for an institution that does adopt it, is it significantly lessens the risk. For two reasons. Firstly, Gur and team have to be ahead of the game, or as close to the game as possible. So they're constantly evolving the algorithms to make sure that they're getting around any new clever hacks. Secondly, once you've taken an image of an individual that you now trust as being that individual, the ease of which you can use the iiDENTIFii capability to continually revalidate without doing a full three-way match and checking identity documents, just confirm that it is the same individual that you onboarded a year ago, 6 months ago. That's a game changer. And at the price point that iiDENTIFii come in at on that type of capability really makes it quite difficult, not impossible ever, but quite difficult for fraudsters to, as you said, the example you used, the next day come and steal all your money. If there's a point where you revalidate Jonathan Lamb through his app before a transaction is executed, it removes that risk or reduces that risk significantly.
Let's take a little bit of a step to the right here. I'm interested, Gur, on the blockchain side of things. Again, it came up on one of the questions or a point as well. I'll try to find out who raised it. What did you actually build this on? Is this built in something new and novel like blockchain threaded security, or and if it's not, why not?
It's not built on blockchain. We run a Microsoft Azure cloud instance. The blockchain infrastructure comes more into the conversations on SSID, and it's the blockchain in terms of whether you're running on Bitcoin or Ethereum and or Hyperledger. There are different types of approaches of enterprise to the different blockchain environments, and it's really not it's a necessary requirement of the architecture. Yes, it's sexy, yes, it's topical, and yes, it lends itself very much to the self-sovereign identity requirements, but it's not a requirement for straight IDV. It would be an over-engineering, and that's why you don't see it being used in the identity verification space in the vanilla process.
Are you going to ever move on to something like blockchain?
If and when the need arises for our core business, I think we're seeing more discussions happening around self-sovereign identity, either on a pure SSID or a centralized or a hybrid approach. And in those instances, then yes, we would consider that. But currently for our core business, it's not a need. We're very much product-led in terms of what we see on the ground rather than sitting in our white tower and contemplating what the ideal look and feel would be. It's actually what do customers need, what they need on the ground. And when you go into Africa, blockchain is one idea, but the real core of it is how do you onboard someone with a very basic Android handset? How do you onboard someone with very little data on their phone or storage capability on their phone? So our problems are not as necessarily as exciting or high pie in the sky ideas as blockchain. It's more granular on the ground verification methods that we deal with.
I'm glad you mentioned self-sovereign identity as well. Can you give like a 30-second overview of what it is, and then your opinion about whether you think this is actually going to come and become a big thing? Because it's been talked about, there's a lot of hype about it. There's clearly a lot of benefits if we can get it to work, but there's a lot of problems in terms of getting that standardization and consensus globally to make this actually become an operating system for ID.
Absolutely. So SSID, self-sovereign identities, or SSI, self-sovereign identity, is about a person as themselves being sovereign, being king over, being queen over, controlling their own identity, right? So the lay of the land now is that a institution will process your identity documents or biometrics, and that document or biometric will sit in their environment rather than in your environment as an individual. And the philosophical intent is to say, well, I'm the owner of that identity biometric or the identity document. Why is that parameter sitting outside of my environment? So I want to be self-sovereign. I want to own myself those identity parameters. I want them in my own environment. The own environment that individuals have is not usually a Microsoft or AWS instance. It's a mobile telephone or a portable device. So it's how do I get those identity parameters into a wallet or into a secure enclave of my actual mobile device, and how can I control the distribution of those parameters as and when I want on a controlled permission basis to various institutions. So if I want to approach, be let into a club, and the person wants to know whether I'm over or under 18, then I don't need to tell them that I'm born on the 3rd of May. I just need to tell them I'm over 18. They don't even know that I'm 63 or 28 or 18 and a half. So it's much more granular control. It's in the control of the individual. It's on the device of the individual, and it's taking back ownership of what we or the SSI proponents feel is rightly belonging to the individual, which it is identity parameters.
You're obviously a big believer in this. Do you think it's actually going to get legs and become a thing?
Whether I'm a big believer in it, I definitely believe in the philosophy that we should own what belongs to us, right? That's indisputable. The question is, and it's quite a simple way of saying it is, Colin, can I ask you, do you believe you own your money? Do you believe Where's your money sitting?
I used to believe I own it. Then I put it in a bank, and I noticed they said I've credited you, and I asked why, and it's because they've got it. They actually owe it to me, so I don't have it. So you're asking the wrong problem. I wish I believed I own it, but I realised that I don't really have it.
That's the perfect example, right? So first of all, the wealth is yours, but you're not the custodian of that wealth because you found a logical, more secure place to put your wealth, which is inside a bank. Same with me, and same with John. So as collaborative Homo sapiens, we've decided to leverage the economies of scale of choosing few institutions to be custodians of our wealth. Now, similarly, in theory, in the ideal situation, we'd all own our own wealth, we'd all own our own identity, but whether we can create, maintain, and deploy the infrastructure to maintain our own identity, yet to be seen. So yes, I could hold it on my device, but what happens when my toddler throws my device down into the swimming pool? What happens to all my identity? How do I bootstrap? How do I start again? So these aren't simple questions, and I think it's an evolving space, and it's a very interesting space, but I think the jury is still very much out as to whether every individual own their own SSI, or they will centrally allow entities to be custodians, or there'll be a hybrid model. It's very much a topical subject.
Do you think there'll come a point where biometric, but specifically facial ID, is no longer secure? And let me rephrase it to be a bit more specific on this. Without you continuing to upgrade your technologies and to look at other methods of authentication, that it would become insecure or unsecure.
Yes, going back to what I said at the beginning on this is a virus vaccine space. And you have two groups of individuals, those who are looking to defend the identity theft space, and those who are looking to attack the identity theft space. So this is a treadmill, and it's moving fast. And if you stop, you're going to come off that treadmill quite quickly. So yes, I do think that there are constant threats to the security and the authentication protocols, and that's the reason that technology is what technology is. It's a constant move towards progress and towards outperforming the dangers and threats of the space. So definitely, if you just leave the technology as it is in 2022, then you're going to be redundant in 2023.
What are you expecting to see, Jono? Because obviously this is just one format for authentication. I mean, we've got iris scanning as a potential. We've got thumbprints, as a potential. I don't think anyone believes that signatures should be maintained as an authoritative statement of proving your identity, or at least I hope they don't. But what are you expecting to see over the next 4 or 5 years?
It's also very interesting, Colin. You mentioned thumbprint. Not everyone's got a thumbprint. Not easy for every single individual to, especially if you're a blue collar worker. It's been proven now that using fingerprint, thumbprint, also not foolproof. But your face, your biometric in that sense is definitely not something that's going to go away quickly. And to Gur's point, as long as we can keep up with the ability to circumvent it, it's probably going to be one of the lasting new ways of identifying people. Iris scanning, at the moment, the reason this works, certainly in the markets where we operate, is because of the phone and the device, the ability for this to, in your pocket, become quite a frictionless example of, or a tool to validate yourself. So as fast as the tech on these devices moves, as well the capability like iiDENTIFii to move to iris, or I don't know, whatever else. I mean, there are already thumbprints on there. So I think it's not an easy question to answer, but I think that as fast as the tech moves on the platform you use to identify yourself, both the providers like iiDENTIFii and the fraudsters will try and tackle keeping up with that capability.
What's your view? I mean, I guess for both of you, do you think this is going to become the primary way for identification, at least for the next couple of years? And are you expecting it to therefore proliferate across virtually every kind of field or user case that it's not just about banks. It could be employing staff, logging on to your computer in the morning, booking your tickets, turning up at the gate for a football game and not actually having to go and wave anything around. It's just facial recognition. You can walk straight in, going through into your supermarkets, Amazon Go type scenarios where you actually don't need potentially your phone. You're recognized visually, walk in, pick your stuff up, walk out, and it will automatically build. Is this fanciful, or do you think there's the possibility we can go this way?
So I certainly do. I mean, we're already, a lot of us have been doing this for a while, just getting into your phone, into your laptop, it uses images of your face. I think the more secure it is and the more sophisticated the algorithms around it means that more and more big corporate organizations will adopt it. It's not just a financial services solution. It started here, but it's relevant virtually, I'd argue, in any workflow. One of the questions was on the chat, is it relevant in the motor industry? Absolutely. Identifying individuals you are selling a car to, buying a car from, it's just easier to do it like this. So my view is it's going to proliferate across and become as common to us as putting a PIN code into an ATM is.
Gur, you also nodding your head there?
Definitely. I think that it is going to become a lot more prolific and ubiquitous. I'm just seeing the trend from when we started, 4 or 5 years ago to what's happening now. I think that the face is something that you are. It's an aspect of your biometric that the algorithms have been trained on very, very extensively. And there are other aspects, there's the iris, there's the palm, there's the vein, there's the voice. And eventually there'll be other aspects of who you are that get trained very accurately. But right now, there's been an incredible amount of data, capital, research, and horsepower put into optimizing the accuracy of the face. It's also incredibly convenient. It's much more convenient to deploy SDKs and apps in mobile devices where you can take a selfie from a customer or an individual's ergonomic perspective. Everybody knows how to take a selfie, and it's very intuitive. We're seeing, as iiDENTIFii, we're seeing demands for the technology from banks to non-bank financial institutions, to telcos, to mines, to employee authentication, to integrations into Microsoft Office, to supermarket self-checkout, unassisted self-checkout for age-prohibited items. So we're in a very unique space and time where this technology is becoming ubiquitous. People know it, they trust it. The data and the science supports that trust. The ergonomics and the user journey is very intuitive, and it's much more convenient. Imagine walking through a Woolies or a ShopRite or a Tesco's overseas and not having to take anything out of your pocket or wallet, taking the product off the shelf, little Internet of Things sensors under all of those products that automatically correlate your total bill to the items you've taken off the shelf and put in your packet, taking the packet, and as you walk out, being opting in via your face authentication, which is linked to your credit card and your loyalty card, and your checkout process is infinitely more smooth and intuitive, and reducing store effort and hours. So right from financial services to telcos to mines to employee authentications across industries to retail to online retail, it's an interesting time to be in face and biometrics.
Well, Gur, thank you very much for leading the way. Thank you also for showing everyone that has an accountancy background that you can go and do and I'm accountancy as well, do interesting things that actually make a difference for the world in technology. Jonathan, we've got another event planned for a couple of weeks called Power Pulse. Do you want to just give us a quick 30-second intro to that? And then for everyone that's here on the call, thank you very much for joining. I'm not going to re-say thank you. We're going to close it after you've given that little intro.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Colin. So this is the second of our first 3 OneHub Insider discussions. You've heard from 2 partners so far, iiDENTIFii and Vodacom a couple of weeks ago. The next one is a solution which we built ourselves. So it's a homegrown bank-based solution, but it's very non-traditional. PowerPulse is really aimed at helping our clients again take themselves off the grid. Solar energy, it's really core to our overall ESG, SDG ambition through OneHub. And so I'm not going to say too much more. I'll leave that for a couple of weeks' time, but that'll be the third installment where you'll be joined, Colin, by the PowerPulse team. Again, product that's been up and running for about a year, got some great traction in the market, and that's next. So really looking forward to that one.